Thank you all for being here. We're excited to chat with you today. We're going to talk about ways that you can turbocharge your career through personal branding and thought leadership. Phil and myself and Jan are the creators of Elevate Your Personal Brand, which helps you to use your personal brand to build the career of your dreams, build a brand that tells your story, and to have the success that you're looking for through the story that you build. So I'm sure you all know Phil. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jamie Cohen. I am the creator of The Right Words. So I help people learn how to communicate more effectively and feel more comfortable and confident with the words that come out of their mouth, and feel more comfortable and confident building relationships that help them to live the life that they want and to become leaders in their respective fields. So we're going to be talking about how you can turbocharge your career. So what we've done through the Elevate Your Personal Brand, which is part of the Cyber Leadership Institute, is find burgeoning leaders who are looking for ways to establish themselves, not just as cyber security leaders, but as professionals and build a brand that tells their story within their organizations and beyond. So before I get into everything, what I'll ask you to do is, if you see there's a little way that you can raise your hand, there's a little icon you can press. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and just to get an idea of what everyone knows and where the best place for us to start is. I'm not sure if you're able to do the hand raising if your video isn't on, and if that's the case, what I'll ask you to do is just click your unmute and unmute your mic. And the clicking on and off will just show me that you are saying yes to that. Also, one more thing, you can also write into the chat. We have the chat open, so I'll see all of your answers there. So how many of you are familiar with what a personal brand is, or at least have heard of personal branding? So I see a few hands, but I see a lot of you don't have your hands up. So this is a great place to start. So let's talk about personal branding. So personal branding is, a lot of people see this as a business brand. So as a typeface or a website or colors or a logo or an image that represents who you are and what your business is about. But really, your personal brand is your reputation. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room, and it's the story that follows you and even precedes you when you enter a room. And so the power in creating a strong personal brand is being able to walk into almost any room and have warm interactions rather than cold interactions. So people will, if they've read about you on LinkedIn or in different articles, if you are being interviewed or you are writing in different environments, your story will precede you and people will have some general idea of who you are. So this is really valuable for if you're interested in escalating into the C-suite, or if you are just simply interested in being more well-known at your company or even building your own brand. So what we're going to talk about today are strategies that you can use through personal branding to turbocharge your career, to achieve the things that you want to achieve, to build stronger relationships with the people around you, and to tell better stories. So I'm going to start out just by asking Phil a few questions, and then we'll go from there. And again, if you have any questions as we continue on through this conversation, please feel free to type those into the chat, and then we'll have time at the end also for anyone to ask questions aloud. Phil, you've done an amazing job of developing a very strong brand that speaks to not just your professional, not just you as a professional in your career, but as an individual, and the different trials and tribulations that you have gone through to get to where you are. And you recently published another book. You're a best-selling author, and all of this has come through building a brand and writing and telling your story. So what would you say? You do a lot of writing, and I'm sure everyone here has seen you posting on LinkedIn and in the CLI app, and you do a great job of making us feel like we're there with you and telling a story that resonates. And what would you say? A lot of people are very busy and don't know where to start when it comes to thought leadership or when it comes to telling a story. So how can a busy professional go about replicating what you've created?
Okay, thanks, Jamie, and welcome everyone to our live Zoom call to talk about personal branding. And like Jamie has already alluded, we assume a lot of people already know that what personal branding is and why it's important. So we won't bore you by explaining the why and try to go straight into the how. And myself, I have built my career in the last 7-8 years around thought leadership. So for me, personal branding goes beyond the, basic social media metrics around how many likes you get, how many comments, how many followers, into the next level, which is how do you develop consistent and compelling thought leadership that is able to push your career forward. And that's exactly what I did. But before I started all this, I was like in the same shoes with a lot of professionals who are, they find it difficult to start because when they look ahead and see other people writing books, writing long form blogs and publishing everywhere, what seems ahead of them is an enormous task. But I was very lucky back in 2015 or 14 when I was starting my journey. I stumbled across this quote that fundamentally changed everything. We said to begin. So instead of looking, looking too way ahead into, how I write a book, I started small. I started by commenting on what other people were publishing on LinkedIn. I started writing my short form posts on LinkedIn, and then I moved that into long form blogs on LinkedIn. But things changed when I started publishing my thought leadership within peer-reviewed Isaka magazine. So that was again the next level up. So just to share some, few practical ideas. And before I get into there, I just wanted to highlight that I was researching yesterday, and I noted that only about 1% of LinkedIn users produce original content. So there's a lot of prime real estate for all of us here to grab, because the only way for you to differentiate yourself from another professional is to develop compelling thought leadership. And there's not many people who are doing it. And Jen and myself would attest to this. We have mentored a lot of people over the last few years. Everyone commits to writing, but when it comes to executing, they all vanish away. But anyway, let me go straight into the how. Number one strategy that I'll share is to go and fish where the fish are. So when I started, I made this terrible mistake of trying to set up my own blog and directing traffic towards my thought leadership, but then I didn't have a name, I didn't have any standing in the industry. So the idea is to go fish where the fish are. Means instead of setting up your own blog and spending thousands of money developing flashy websites, and then you've got 10 visits a month, go and publish your content on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn has got hundreds of millions of active users every month. So for me, that was a very smart idea because I didn't need to spend. The platform was there. Then the other idea, like I said, once I was comfortable with LinkedIn, I also moved to publish my articles in peer-reviewed magazines. Isaka is a good example. They had a readership of around 500,000 professionals a month across their international journal. So that would have taken me maybe 5 years to get there if I was doing it on my own website. So leveraging the platforms that are already there, that are reputable, that have got a global reach, I think that's the first quick win. The second issue, like I said, a lot of people don't start writing because, and this was my own challenge when I started, I made a mistake of sharing my ambitions with friends and said, I want to write a cybersecurity book, because then I was transitioning from technology risk into cybersecurity. But the feedback that I got was discouraging. They said, who are you to be writing a book? You should become an expert. And then once people know who you are and they respect your opinions, then you can publish a book. But for me, it was the other way around. I was writing to become an expert. I wasn't waiting to become an expert to write. So when I started writing my first book, which is the 5 Anchors of Cyber Resilience, I was just getting into cybersecurity. And I realized that I was maybe 5-10 years behind my peers because I spent a lot of years in technology risk. To accelerate that learning and to establish my name, I needed to start writing and publish a book. So as part of that process, I went through more than 250 references, including books and long form articles, and that accelerated my learning. By the time I published my book, my knowledge gap had already closed and I had gone past some of my peers who had been in the industry for years. So do not wait to become an expert before you write. You write to become an expert. And for me, that's always been, that's why I go out of my comfort zone and research on areas that I am not familiar with. I've written about blockchain, I've written about machine learning, all these things. I've never seen a blockchain code before, but it forces me to research. And that's the power of writing, because it improves the clarity of thought. It, forces you to research and to, package those ideas in a way that people can relate to, and they can, easily take value and implement in their businesses. The third trick that I wanted to share was, obviously, a lot of people don't know, what do I write about? I was very lucky because as part of the work that we do at the Cyber Leadership Institute, I have studied a lot a concept called copywriting, which is, how do you sell your products? And I stumbled across this powerful formula that is universal and that I've used in my own writing, which is called PAS, which stands for pain, agitate, and solution. And exactly that's what I do. When you read my articles or my books, that is exactly what I do. So number one is I identify the pain points of my target audience. So the first idea is you carve out a niche within a niche. You're gonna be really specialized. You can't be a jack of all trades. That's what I was when I was in technology risk. I knew a lot of things, but I was very shallow in each domain. So the idea for you is to carve out a niche within a niche and go really deep, so that, whatever you say, is compelling. It's way better than the next person, because the idea is differentiation. So for me, what I do is I get into the pain of my target audience, which now is, emerging CISOs, because I was in that space before. When I started my role as a CISO or head of cybersecurity 5 years ago, I went through a lot of challenges. And exactly because I have stepped in their shoes, that's exactly what we are doing at the Cyber Leadership Institute, is to help, alleviate those pain points. So number one is you identify something that's very important, that keeps people awake at night, that's costing them money, costing them health, causing them a lot of anxiety. It has to be real. It has to be painful. Then the next stage is to agitate, which means I use heavily marshaled evidence and case studies and my own experiences to add salt to the proverbial wound. So, once they know their pain, you need to agitate it so that they can take some action. The last bit then is for me to provide clear-cut, compelling, proven solutions. So that's why, when you are writing, I always encourage. My first article was on cloud computing because I had spent 18 months, embedding myself deeply into a complex cloud transformation program. So in the end, I knew that, this is what I have done. And there's no better way than to share first-hand experiences than to share, something that, you have read in the Harvard Business Review. So for me, that PAS formula has helped me because it just simplifies everything. And I always try to be as brief as I can. So if I provide solutions, it's maybe 3 solutions that they need to, they can, implement cost effectively within their environment. The last point, I just wanted to highlight, the writing piece is a journey. It started off, like I said, I started off with commenting on other people's LinkedIn profiles and building that tribe. When I started at 300 connections, now I've got almost 34,000 followers, because, over time, over the last 7 years, I've been very intentional about it. But it's a pyramid. You can't just start by writing a book. When I wrote my first book, 50% of that book was already blogs and articles that I had published everywhere. So I just got that, and then I had a solid start. So instead of being, stuck in inaction because it looks overwhelming, if you haven't done it before, start from somewhere, start writing, get feedback, get someone in this call to become your buddy and hold you accountable, because it's very easy to talk. Execution is hard, but over time it becomes easy. When I started writing, it felt forced. Everything was difficult. My drafts were weak. Right now, if I sit here, I can, in 4 hours, I can write a blog and publish it, and I'll be very happy with it, because it's a muscle that you exercise over time. But anyway, thanks, Jamie. I will pause here for now.
That's a lot of great information. And again, we're talking about how to turbocharge your career. And Phil hit on so many incredible things, because when you think about where you want to be in your career, a lot of people feel that you have to wait until you gain the expertise. And you have to wait to gain the expertise until you're allowed to speak out with your opinion. But when you look at a really strong team, or you look at the best team in the world, it's not a team that is composed of the top experts in the world necessarily. There are some top experts, there are some novices, there are some people who are intermediate, because innovation happens when we have diverse thought processes, when we have diverse individuals. So if there's anything holding you back from taking that leap, that's something to consider. You don't have to be an expert to start sharing your story. And like Phil was saying also, there is so much opportunity on LinkedIn, because only 1% of LinkedIn users, or around 1%, are creating original content, which means even though there are close to 700 million users, there's not as much noise as there is on other platforms. So if you use these strategies, and some of which we're going to talk about, you have the opportunity to build almost anything. And so a question people often have is, well, where do I start? And so I know in my case, Phil knew exactly where he wanted to go and in what area he wanted to work in. In my case, I had a bunch of different careers. And before I launched my own business through building a personal brand on LinkedIn, I was the head of marketing for an industrial real estate company. And that wasn't the right fit for me, but I also didn't envision myself necessarily as an executive, a marketing executive. It just didn't feel right for me. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do or how to get to the next level. So creating content and building this brand through telling stories was something that was really powerful for me and helped me get to that next level. So Phil, you often talk a lot about authenticity. And I know this is something that a lot of people are concerned about, or they're unsure about the difference between being vulnerable and authenticity. So what is authenticity, and how is it important to personal branding? But also, most importantly, because we're here today to talk about the how can you use your own authenticity to push forward and to really turbocharge your career?
Thanks, Jamie. So I think that's a fantastic question. I shared my story before, and it's there in my book. When I migrated here to Australia 15 years ago, the first 3.5 years were tremendously difficult for me, because as an first generation African Australian immigrant, that idea of fitting into the corporate sector. I was already 27 years old, and I had my core values, I had my belief system, I had my personality. And suddenly, because of the concept of fitting in, I had to change the way I behaved and interacted and spoke. And for me, that caused a lot of, it was difficult. Real change only came when, back in 2016, when I got my first award, which was given by ISACA here in Sydney, and I started to embrace my story. So authenticity for me, it's very simple, is being who you are, because like I said, the idea around personal branding is to be different, because that's what people are looking for. They're looking for diversity of thought. They're looking for different experiences. And the only way, the easiest way to be different is to embrace your narrative, because I can try to be like my colleague Jan here, but Jan's story is different, and I can never be better at being Jan than Jan himself. So for me, embracing my story, which, obviously started with a lot of difficulties and obstacles and, working very hard to turn it around, I think that's why I built this great platform with, almost 34,000 followers on LinkedIn, because I embraced my narrative. I shared my successes, but not only my successes, but also my failures. And that's the biggest problem we see if you go on other platforms like Instagram, where people embellish their stories. They're always dining at fine restaurants. They're always polished. They put makeup. That's not real life. For me, real life is the struggles, the process, and the successes. And that's exactly what I did. So what authenticity does is, it gives you three things, because what I've learned is, if you are going to work with people either they are going to give you business, they're going to promote you, only three things have to happen. They need to know you. So for me, sharing my journey from the start, and people saw me evolve. Like I said, I was sharing all these very weak LinkedIn posts that were all over the place. The drafts were weak, they were rambling, they were not coherent. But they saw me evolve over time. My writing became better, my story became better. And what it does is, when people know you, they trust you, and trust comes if, I've been working with Jenny over this course, maybe for the last many months. And obviously the trust index has gone up because, we share our real stories. I interact with it every day. And that's what I do with authenticity. So people need to know you, they need to trust you, and they need to like you. And, the liking bit sounds fluffy, but like I said, it comes down from people trusting you. And for me, embracing my story has been maybe the best thing that I have ever done. And just in conclusion, and I'm very intentional with what I post on LinkedIn, and you can see there's a good balance there. When I started, I was sharing maybe 80% was around my personal struggles and triumphs and what I've gone through. Over time, I started to shift the gear because I was getting better and better at cybersecurity and cyber leadership. So at first I started 80-20, which means 80% was my personal experiences. But over time I started shifting, and you can see now, I think I'm around the 60-40. 60% of the content that I post is around cyber leadership. This is what I do, and this is what makes my heart sing. But 40% is still my personal story, because I still need to have that connection with people. That's why when we started, my Zoom account was the Cyber Leadership Institute, but then I changed it to my name because people want to connect with people. They don't want to connect with logos. They don't want to connect with brands. They want to connect with people. So exactly, that's what, for me, authenticity is all about.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing all of that, Phil. And for any of you that are still wondering, well, that sounds amazing, and I'd love to share my story, but I don't know where to start, or things weren't really that tough for me, and I had struggles just like anyone else, but my story isn't unique. How do I really begin? This is a good question to ask yourself and to think about, because something that stops people from telling their story is this inner monologue that we are not good enough. And I'm not going to get into all of that empowerment, but it's something that's really powerful. But what I want to talk to you about is, what are some steps that you can take to start feeling comfortable telling your story? So if you don't feel like you're ready to get out there and start writing and start talking about yourself, a great way to get started is in the comments of other people's content. And so if you're not familiar with how to find content that you're interested in, a great way to do this is through hashtags. So hashtags aren't quite as popular on LinkedIn as they are on other platforms, but they are, because of that, they're very valuable. So for instance, if you were to look up the hashtag cyber resilience, a lot of posts that have used that hashtag populate underneath that. You can go through and see if any of the content resonates with you. And if it does, you can leave a thoughtful comment. And this is a great start in telling your story, because leaving a thoughtful comment looks something like this. The first part is you're responding to what the person has written. You're acknowledging them and acknowledging the work that they put in you're not going overboard, but you're giving them some acknowledgement. Everyone likes to be heard and acknowledged. Then the second part is you're adding in your perspective. So what is your spin on what they wrote? Or do you have a question that you could use to keep the conversation going? So the reason why this is so powerful is this gets you comfortable doing something you may not be comfortable with, which is telling your story, but it's through the lens of someone else's content. So it feels a little bit more protected. So then what you can do is once you start commenting regularly on certain individuals' content, they'll start to recognize you. And this is a great way to build connections. So then when you are ready to post your own content, all of these people recognize you and they're waiting to hear what you have to say. And the great thing about writing a thoughtful comment is you can take that and translate that into your very own post. So that's a great way to get started. So again, that's using a hashtag. So putting hashtag whatever you're interested in, scrolling down, seeing what populates. If you see any content that's interesting to you, leaving thoughtful comments, and then translating that when you're ready into your very own posts. If you're like me and you're not quite sure what you are interested in or what you want to be writing about, you can use these hashtags to look up a variety of different content, even content that isn't directly related to your field, because this is still a great way to build a network. And people that you connect with may be interested in something that you're interested in, and then maybe help you figure out where exactly you want to go. So in my case, when I was doing marketing, I knew that I didn't want to stay in that environment. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. So I just started talking about things that were happening to me and my perspective on them. I talked about learning how to play Sudoku and how that was really complicated. And this wasn't anything profound. Anyone can pick up a Sudoku book and figure it out. But I talked about the things that I learned and how my thought process changed and how I felt after being a novice and then having a lot of experience. And a lot of people responded to that. And the more that people responded, the more I geared my content toward their responses. And then I was able to develop the brand that I have today, just simply by trying something out and telling my story. So a great way to start is through those comments, using hashtags, and then finding content that inspires you, and then being able to take it from there and start your own content simply by practicing in those comments. If you are very clear on where you want to go, so if you are in cybersecurity, you want to escalate into the C-suite, you know that's what you want to do. Maybe you were like Phil and you see that you are years behind your peers and you want to get that recognition, what's a great way to start? So of course, content is going to be very powerful, but something else that's really powerful is your LinkedIn profile. So I'm sure you've all gotten connection requests from people trying to sell you something, and you're not really sure who you want to connect with, because if I connect with this person down the road, maybe this is a valuable connection, but I also don't want to tell them that I don't want to buy their product, and it can stress you out and you can get burnt out before you even begin. So something that's really powerful is your LinkedIn profile, where you can have a clear description of who you are, what you're about, and what you're interested in. So this is a great way for people to get to know you even before you start writing content. So the old way to create a LinkedIn profile was to talk about all of your accomplishments, list them out, list all of the different softwares and different qualifications and certifications that you had. Now, as Phil was saying before, people want to do business with people. We've moved away from this idea of transactional anything, and people want human interaction. So simply by changing your LinkedIn profile to first person already helps to make that shift. A really powerful part of your profile is your background image. So the image right behind your profile picture. And can I share my screen here really quick, Phil? So the background image I'm talking about is right here. And this is very valuable real estate. This is just like a website. When someone navigates to your website, you have about 5 seconds to convince them to stay. So you want to make it clear what it is that they are, what it is that you do, and why they would want to continue reading or scrolling down. So having all of this information here, mine actually needs a little bit of editing right now, but it's a good general way to start, having an understanding of what I offer, using the want your words to have more impact. So when someone comes to my page, they know that I do something with language or with communication, and then other ways that they can get in touch. The second most important part is your byline. And so that will explain what it is that you do, which is obvious, but here's a little trick that you might not be aware of. So a lot of people here will write just the title of their company or their title at the company. So CEO of this company, director of this, and that doesn't really give a lot of information about you. And like before, when I discussed the power of commenting and starting there so you gain recognition, when you comment on someone's post, they see only the first, I think, 25 characters or so on that post next to your name. So the information you have here is really valuable. So in my case, it makes sense that I have the communication coach and advisor because I run my own business. But in your case, if you are working at a company and you want people to recognize you for a particular thing that you're doing, having that information first is great. So if you look down here, I say making you a powerhouse communicator. Having that in the beginning could be very powerful so that, again, when you comment on someone's post, they might be interested in what you have to say. They go and see your byline, and then they go to your profile where you have all this information. So then this next part here is your summary under the about section. So having some information that catches attention, gets people interested in reading more, talking a little bit about yourself. And then I always use this formula, talking about yourself, why that's important, how you can work together, and then how people can get in touch with you. And all of this information, even if you're within a company, this is going to be really powerful because if you're interested in talking about a certain topic, people who are interested in that topic will, if they get through this part of your profile, which hopefully they will if you have all the different components, they'll be more likely to reach out to you. So having a strong profile is really powerful because that's where you want to sell. In your content, that's where you are getting to connect with people, you're building community, you are getting engagement, and in your profile, that's where you tell people what you want them to do. So I see we have some questions here. Is it really necessary to put few letters that one earned at the back of the name? So do you need to have like CISM or CISSP, etc.? What would you have to say about that, Phil?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think it comes down to where you are right now in your career journey and where you want to go. A lot of people we deal with, say, in the Cyber Leadership Institute, have been in the game for quite some time, 5 to 20 years. And as you can see from my own profile, I obviously earned my CISA and CISM back in 2004 and 2005, respectively. But over time, I outgrew those certifications. And with all due respect, those certifications set me up. They were game changers. When I did my CISA, there was less than 10 of us in Zimbabwe who were certified information systems auditors. So I had all these multiple offers from Big Four firms because but 10 years later, if you go on LinkedIn, there were thousands of people with CISA and hundreds of them from Zimbabwe and all over the place. So the idea for me, is that self-awareness. And one little book that I think also changed my life is called Who Moved My Cheese, which means, your cheese will always move. We are comfortable now, and these are big differentiators, but over time they change. So it depends, for someone who's trying to break into cybersecurity or break into a functional role, becoming this senior enterprise architect, there's no harm saying CISM or CISSP. But seriously, if you want to become a CISO, I don't think that matters a lot, because what you're now looking for are those leadership skills, negotiation, persuasion, and board communication skills. And that's not embodied in the certifications. So I would say, just develop that self-awareness. It's okay to have those. But if you look at LinkedIn now, how many people have CISM? thousands and thousands from all over the world. And with this globalized, I feel like those are no longer big differentiators in your career journey, especially if you want to land a leadership role. With all due respect, I'm an ambassador for ISACA. I represent these certifications, and they are great for people getting into cybersecurity and moving into functional roles. So I don't want to sound like I'm undermining them. But like I say, if you want to move up into the C-suite, and say it's a different ball game.
I would agree. I would agree with that. And so another way that if you want some more information about whether this will be valuable or not, if you take a look at some of the job responsibilities that are listed online, if you're looking for a new job and you see those listed there, and that's a job that you want to move into. So say you are not at the point where you're moving into the C-suite, maybe you're a leader or a burgeoning leader, and you want to get a particular position and it's listed on a lot of the jobs that you're interested in, then maybe that's a good thing to put next to your name, because when recruiters are using Sales Navigator, which is LinkedIn software that helps them find prospective employees on LinkedIn, that might be valuable. Another thing that might be valuable is putting that into your summary. So if you have a section maybe at the bottom of your summary that has certifications or something like that, but basically it doesn't hurt, but it isn't, like Phil said, it's not necessarily going to help if you're moving into that C-level position. Okay, we have another question from San. Phil, based on your experience, what are the top 2 tips on starting to comment on other posts and writing your first blog on LinkedIn?
Okay, great. I'll go quickly, and then I think Jamie put some experience there too. So great. I would say always start with something that you know very well. And there's always something that you know very well. Like everyone on this call have got a lot of experience. So it's either your personal experiences or something technical. For me, I would say, the idea here is you need to leave a thoughtful comment, and not just comment for the sake of commenting, because I see all the time people trying to game the system by just saying, oh, this is really insightful, but they haven't even read. So for me, I always try to provide, real perspectives, obviously as brief as I can, but leave a thoughtful comment on something that you know. And I was surprised. I shared this, I think that happened towards the end of last year. I went on I commented on a post on LinkedIn, and I shared my experiences. And my comment almost generated almost 1,000 likes, just a comment, which is way better than my real posts, because it was a thoughtful comment. I spent time. I wrote it in my notes, and I edited it, and I posted it. And at the back of that, someone invited me to feature on their podcast in the USA, which is the leadership podcast. So the idea here is that's number 1 rule. Make sure you leave a thoughtful comment on something that you know very well. The second bit is be very careful, because I think when you are starting off, the idea is to build a tribe. Like I say, you take your friends, you take people with wider reach, but make sure you've got their consent, because one thing that annoys a lot of people is just being tagged, people who take people willy-nilly, and it's very embarrassing for you to, if someone tells you to untag them, I think you will feel a little embarrassed. So just courtesy note to say, this is what I'm going to be doing. Are you comfortable with? So Jamie and myself, people who have gone through our Elevate Your Personal Branding course, we have given them the go ahead to go and tag us. And we're seeing all this activity because it helps you scale. I've got, like I said, I've got so many connections. If I comment on your post, it's just going to get it wider. And then writing your first blog, again, find an area that you're comfortable with, and find someone to hold you accountable, because the hardest thing with writing your first blog is to get it done. A lot of people, I'd say 95% of people I have dealt with, they commit to writing blogs, but they never write blogs. So find a topic again that you're familiar with, lived experiences, a project that you have run in your organization. Maybe you have modernized your perimeter security, or you've migrated applications to the cloud. There's so many things that you're familiar with. And that's just zero there and write a 750 to 1,200 words blog. And over 2 weeks, find someone to peer review it. I'll be happy to do it if you commit to doing that. Anyone on this group, So for me, the idea is to get it done. It's never perfect. Sometimes you start off with 20 likes. It's okay. Just keep going. Writing is a muscle that only gets better with practice.
Absolutely. And I have a couple things that I would add on to that, Phil. Before, Phil was just talking about how he commented on a post and got almost 1,000 likes and got invited on a podcast and all these things. Where do you find a post like that? So there's this part of LinkedIn, the news section, where the news editors will they'll repost content of individuals who are commenting on news articles, or there are LinkedIn influencers, which are basically celebrities in the business world who have a little "in" next to them with a little speech bubble, and their content often gets tens of thousands, if not more, likes and comments and that sort of thing. So finding content like that and commenting early. So if you catch a post by one of these people and it's early on, so it's been an hour or two or a few hours, that's a great post to comment on, because that will gain engagement over time, and then more people are likely to see your comment. And then when it comes to writing your first blog on LinkedIn, having a blog an article can be powerful because that shows up on your LinkedIn profile. But when it comes to building a community and building an audience, articles get the least engagement out of any type of content on LinkedIn. Now, if you have a newsletter, which we're not going to get into those details today, but if you have a newsletter, putting out blogs through the newsletter may get more engagement. Those are getting a lot of engagement right now, but an article on its own is unlikely to. But it's still very powerful to have that on your profile. And what you can do is, like Phil said, write that article, have it peer reviewed, you put that on your profile, and then now what you can do is break that into chunks and rewrite it just a little bit so that you can post it as individual posts, which are likely to get more engagement. But something to think about is, when you're sharing any sort of information on LinkedIn, a question you want to ask yourself is, why should anyone care? Which can sound a little bit harsh, but there's so much information online. If someone's scrolling through LinkedIn, you have to grab their attention and you have to give them a reason to care. So if you read the post that you wrote, is there a reason that someone would care to read more? So does this solve a problem for them? Does it answer a question? And then furthermore, does it ask anyone to take any action, which is the call to action? So the basic components of a post are that attention grabbing, which is the first line, and then information that either solves a problem, answers a question, or tells a story, and then a call to action, which either can be a call to have people comment or reach out to you or something of that sort. So that way, when you're posting, there's always a reason behind why you're posting rather than just getting the content out there. Because there are two parts that people really get stuck on LinkedIn, which is, one, consistency. So feeling like there isn't enough content to put out, and then getting stressed and burnt out because of the emotional energy it takes to post all this content. So putting together a blog and breaking it up and scheduling your content can make that a lot more simple. The second one is the exact opposite, where people are pumping out a ton of content, but it isn't valuable to anyone, even if it is great content, and even if it answers questions and it's valuable in and of itself. If it doesn't attract attention and if it doesn't invite people in, and so if it's not spaced out correctly, if it doesn't have that attention grabbing at the beginning, it doesn't have a call to action at the end, people aren't going to necessarily engage with it. So you'll be putting out all of this content, but there won't really be a purpose behind it. So when you are getting started, even if you do feel ready to start just writing content and putting it out there, commenting is a very important part of the strategy because it is getting your name out there. It's getting people familiar with you. So that way, when you're ready to post, they are there to support your content. And that's how my name got out there and how my content was seen and how I've gotten opportunities to speak all around the world because people saw me supporting their content and they were interested to see what I had to say on my own. And you might look at me or Phil and see that we have, a lot of connections or followers. But the thing is, just like Phil said, that took years to develop. And the great thing about LinkedIn is you really don't need that many followers to have engagement or to have success, especially when you have people like us, in covering your back. So if you post something and it's something that relates to either Phil or myself and you tag us so that we can comment, that's going to spread it to our networks too. So building community is the most important part. And I know in my first year on LinkedIn, I got over 1 million content views, and I think I had fewer than 5,000 connections. I think I had fewer than 2,000 connections because it's really about supporting other people's content, them seeing your name, and then they'll go looking for you. So that way, when you post that content, they're more likely to support it. So I had a lot of LinkedIn connections who had big audiences. And when they would engage with my content, it would be spread out to their audiences and so on and so forth. So you have a lot of power simply by commenting on someone's content. And so again, that's why having a strong profile is important, because if someone really likes your content, the first thing they're going to do is click on your icon and go to your profile and see what you're about. And I think this also goes back to Phil's story in the beginning of his career, where he wanted to start this blog and put all this energy into that. But what is the point of a blog if no one knows who you are or where to find you? If you're supporting all of this other content and getting your name out there that way, that's a great way to get started and to be more clear about what you want and where you're going.
Thanks, Jamie. Great perspectives. Maybe we've got time for one question, and I'll prefer if someone just, we're talking about personal branding here and getting vulnerable. I'll prefer if you ask the question directly rather than type it. Anyone keen? I know there is a lot of people who are very serious with their personal branding here.
Mm-hmm.
With them one-on-one. Anyone with a question? Okay, great, Juma.
Yeah, I just want to, thanks for the inputs as well. It's really informative. And one of the key things that I would just like to understand is that for those busy people like us in cybersecurity, so building our personal brand is also challenging because we don't have much time to invest on this. So is there any way that we can do this in a more smarter way, shall they say? Or is it something that we can outsource? And if we do outsource, what's the drawback?
Okay.
That's a great question. Do you want to take that, Phil?
Yeah, I will. Brilliant question, Juma. And the number one rule is please never outsource this, because this is it's like an organization which is outsourcing its core competencies. You outsource all the things that someone else can do better than you, but this is you. Like I said, if you think of personal branding in the context of what we're doing here, is developing, a strong record of high quality thought leadership. And that comes from you. It's developing specific skill sets. So the number one thing that you need to do is you need to identify a niche that takes time, because like I said, you need to be highly specialized. As you can tell from my content now on LinkedIn, I no longer write about cloud security or, firewalls, next generation. Not that doesn't matter, but someone else does it better than me. I just focus on helping emerging cyber leaders get into the C-suite and thrive there. That's where, so the idea is for me is to identify just one or two non-negotiable habits and stick with them, because this is about habits. Forget about, sitting down and coming up with grand statements that I want to have 50,000 connections in the next year. All that doesn't matter, and it's not going to happen. what matters is you sticking to habits. So for me, what I do is I read a lot. I try to read a book every week. And because as a writer, I need to have that breadth for me to be able to write compelling and different perspectives. So identify, one or two non-negotiable habits, spare some time every day. The irony, though, is, and I like what you talk about, because I work in cybersecurity, me and Jan are virtual CISOs. We have got an average of 3 clients every time. And we are responsible for cybersecurity for those organizations, which means, I could be much more busier than any other people. But because I spend a lot of time writing and researching, it just means when I started off in my cyber leadership role 5 years ago, it took me 2 weeks or 3 weeks to write a board report. But now if I sit down, I can write a board report in 4 hours, and I'm not even exaggerating, because this is what I do all the time. So the irony is, the more you sharpen your personal branding and thought leadership, the more time you create in your day-to-day role responsibilities. And because I work in this leadership space, I now know how to delegate. There's so many things that I used to do when I was in functional roles that I don't do anymore. I empower my team to do that. And that creates a lot of time for me to, go present to the board of directors and create that personal brand at a very senior level. So I think it's a chicken and egg here. Over time, the more you spend in personal thought leadership, the more time you have on your hand, because then you can create the life that you like. But anyway, I'm conscious of time. I'll stop here.
That's a great response, and I would also add to that too, that if you're having trouble writing, whether it's for commenting or whether it is for creating your own posts, something that's really valuable for me is if you go to on your phone on the Notes app, or if you go onto Google Docs, there is a voice record option, and you can turn that on and speak rather than typing, because a lot of times when we're writing, we get stuck in our head thinking, well, we need to be, if you can even think back to writing in high school or college, where you had to write papers and you're trying to find the perfect words and you're getting stopped up. Speaking is a lot easier, so you can go through, record yourself, and then make edits, and editing is much simpler than composing. So that's a great way to get started. Also, spending, just like Phil said, making this a habit, so each day spending some time. Even if you're really busy, you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes every day where you could spend finding content you like on LinkedIn and commenting, and then saving those comments, so that way you can use that to create your own content. And just having that routine or ritual where just every day you're spending a tiny bit of time, eventually it will get easier. And I do want to be cognizant of time, but I see we have a hand up. Do we have time for one more question?
No, I was going to say, if you've got additional questions, please feel free to contact Jamie or myself, either via LinkedIn or via the Cyber Leadership app. So because we are on top of the hour, and I know a lot of people here in Australia, it's during working hours, they're going to jump to the next call. What we will do is we do have a comprehensive kind of, I'm not sure if I call it a mini playbook. Jan might not be happy with that terminology, but we have a guide that we wrote, which talks about all these areas in much more detail. I'll ask the team to email that to everyone who is RSVP'd into this call. And more importantly, like I say, Jamie, Jan, Darren, and myself, we came together, the 4 of us, and we developed this 4-week comprehensive course, which is called Elevate Your Personal Branding. If you are really serious about taking this a notch higher, there's a few people here like Dan and Michael who have done the course. You can reach out to them and ask their perspectives, but even more importantly, feel free to reach out to Jan, Jamie, or myself and inquire. So great having you here and having this lively conversation. But like I said, conscious of time, please, there's so many questions. Feel free to reach out directly to any of us, and we'll happily share our experiences. So I will end the call here and say have a wonderful day and good night, those that are in the USA and other time zones, and looking forward to continued conversation. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers.